Picture this: 1976, New York City. A young black model sits across from her agents as they slide a contract across the table.
A man stopped me in the street. The man was Peter Beard. He discovered me.
She looks at the numbers. She looks at what the white models are getting. She does the math. Then she does something that makes those men in suits nearly choke on their martinis. She says no. For 3 months, she refuses every single job that won't pay her equally. No work, no income. Just a Somali refugee's daughter teaching the fashion world a lesson they'd never forget. If you want to buy my beauty, you'll pay full price.
He said, I pay it. And I said, how much? He said, well, how much do you want? And all I could think of was the tuition for the university. And I said, $8,000. And he said, you got it.
This is the story of how Iman went from being offered crumbs to building a $25 million empire, how she refused to compete with other black models for the single diversity spot and instead flipped the entire table. Because before she was fashion royalty, before she was Mrs. David Bowie, before she was a CEO, she was just a woman who looked at an industry built on exploitation and said the most beautiful word in any language: no. While the rest of the world was watching moon landings in Woodstock, 14-year-old Iman was watching her father's colleagues disappear. The military coup that gripped Somalia wasn't some distant political drama. It was personal. Her father, Mohammed Abdul Majid, wasn't just any government worker. He was a diplomat, which in coup logic meant target. We left with just the clothes on our backs, Iman would later tell reporters, and she wasn't being poetic. They fled to Kenya, joining the massive wave of Somali refugees seeking safety across the border. But here's what gets me. While other teenagers were worried about homework and crushes, Iman was learning that home could vanish overnight. That safety was negotiable. That being the daughter of educated parents, her mother was a gynecologist by the way, meant nothing when men with guns decided your family was the enemy. She'd later say something that absolutely breaks my heart. I literally have 2 pictures of myself growing up. I am the face of the refugee. 2 pictures. That's it. While we're over here documenting every latte and sunset, Iman's entire childhood exists in 2 photographs. But instead of letting that loss define her, she let it refine her. Every single battle she'd fight in fashion, every boundary she'd push, every no she'd say to discrimination, it all started here, at 16, learning that if you don't fight for your place in the world will happily erase you. The girl who would one day make fashion houses rewrite their rules was first a girl who watched her homeland's rules crumble overnight. And maybe that's why, years later, when people told her, this is just how the industry works, she had the audacity to ask, but why? The refugee camps of Kenya were supposedly temporary, but Iman learned that temporary could stretch into years. She watched families fragment, dreams die, futures evaporate. But she also watched her parents refuse to let their circumstances define their children's potential. Her mother, who'd delivered babies in Mogadishu's best hospitals, now helped refugee women give birth in tents. Her father, stripped of his diplomatic status, still carried himself with dignity. They insisted she continue her education. 5 languages became her arsenal: Somali, Arabic, Italian, English, and Swahili. Each one a bridge to a world that might otherwise shut her out. When other refugee kids gave up on school, Iman was conjugating verbs in Italian, preparing for a future her parents couldn't guarantee but refused to let her abandon. Fast forward to 1975. Iman is 18, studying political science at the University of Nairobi, probably planning some regular career that would make her diplomat father proud. Then Peter Beard shows up. Now, if you don't know Peter Beard, picture this. A white American photographer who loved Africa so much he practically lived there, famous for his dramatic wildlife shots and his even more dramatic personality. He spots Iman on the street and sees dollar signs. Not in a gross way, well, maybe a little gross, but in that way fashion people have of turning humans into concepts. Here's where it gets interesting. Beard wants to photograph her. He's probably expecting this young African girl to be grateful, overwhelmed, Maybe even work for free because, hey, exposure, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Iman listens to his pitch, thinks about it, and then drops this bomb. I want $8,000. $8,000 in 1975. For a girl who'd never modeled before. That wasn't random money, by the way. That was her college tuition. While other models were getting discovered and immediately shipped off to Paris with stars in their eyes and empty pockets, Iman was doing math. If this photography thing didn't work out, she'd need to finish her degree. If it did work out, she'd still need that education because, and this is the part that makes me want to stand up and applaud, she already knew beauty fades, but brains don't. Beard paid it. Of course he paid it. You don't walk away from that kind of confidence. But here's what kills me. Later, Beard would spin stories about discovering her as some goat herd who'd never seen a camera. The educated daughter of a diplomat and a gynecologist, who spoke 5 languages and was studying political science, got repackaged as an exotic fantasy. And this wouldn't be the last time someone would try to rewrite her story to make it more palatable, more primitive, more marketable. The myth-making started immediately. In interviews, Beard would describe finding her like she was some rare artifact, not a college student who probably had plans that afternoon. Fashion magazines ate it up. The story of the wild African beauty tamed by Western fashion sold better than the truth. A multilingual political science student who negotiated like a CEO before she'd ever seen a runway. Years later, Iman would set the record straight in interview after interview, but the damage was done. The fashion world had already decided her narrative. She was exotic, untamed, discovered. Never mind that she'd discovered herself long before Peter Beard showed up with his camera and his colonial fantasies. 1976. New York City. Iman's about to get her first reality check about American fashion, and baby, it's going to bounce. Her very first paid modeling job is for Vogue. Let that sink in. Most models work years to get into Vogue. Iman walks in on day one. The fashion world is shook. Here's this statuesque beauty with copper skin and a neck that seems to go on forever, and everyone wants a piece. But then her agents slide the contracts across the table, and Iman sees the numbers. She looks at what they're offering her. She looks at what the white models are getting. She does the math, and then she does something that probably made those agents choke on their martinis. She says no, not let me think about it, not maybe we can negotiate, just no. For 3 months, she refuses every single job that doesn't pay her the same rate as white models. Can you imagine? You're new to a country, new to an industry, you've got rent to pay, and you're turning down work because the principle matters more than the paycheck. Her agents probably thought she'd lost her mind. This is 1976. The fashion industry operated on the assumption that black models should be grateful for whatever they got. 1 spot per show, maybe. Lower pay, always. That's just how things were. But remember, this is the same girl who watched her whole country change overnight. She knew that how things are is just another way of saying how we've agreed to let them be. During those 3 months, Iman did something else revolutionary. She studied. She went to fashion shows as an observer, not a participant. She watched how the industry worked, who held power, how decisions got made. She was playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. She also networked strategically. At parties, she'd introduce herself to designers, photographers, and editors not as a model begging for work, but as a professional with standards. The message was clear. I'm not desperate. I know my worth, and I'll wait for you to recognize it. After 3 months, the agencies blinked first. They raised her rate to match the white models. And just like that, Iman had won her first battle. But what's brilliant is that she didn't make a big announcement about it. She didn't call the press. She just quietly went to work, knowing she'd drawn a line in the sand that would matter for every black model who came after her. Okay, so picture this disaster. Iman shows up to a major magazine shoot. Big photographer, big budget, big deal. She sits in the makeup chair, ready for transformation. The makeup artist opens their kit, looks at Iman, looks at their products, and basically shrugs. They don't have a single foundation shade that matches her skin.
And the makeup artist asked me a very perplexing question. He asked me, did you bring your own foundation? I had no idea what foundation was.
Not one. So they do what makeup artists in the 70s did when faced with black models. They improvise. Badly. They mix whatever they have, slap it on, and call it a day. When the photos come back, Iman looks at herself and sees gray. Her gorgeous copper skin looks ashy, lifeless.
And when I looked at the mirror, I was flabbergasted because it didn't even look like my skin color anymore. It looked like grayish color picture because the image that was there was not me and was altered in a way that was not good for me or for my skin race.
Like someone drained all the warmth out of her. Now, most models would have complained to their agency, maybe gotten the makeup artist in trouble and moved on. Not Iman. She looks at those gray-faced photos and sees opportunity. From that day forward, she starts mixing her own foundation. In hotel rooms, backstage, wherever. She becomes her own makeup artist before the makeup artists even touch her. She'd arrive at shoots with her perfect shade already mixed, ready to teach these professionals how to actually do their job when it came to black skin. But here's the genius part. She's not just solving her own problem. She's collecting data. Every shoot, every mixture, every formula that works or doesn't work, she's filing it away. Because somewhere in that brilliant political science brain of hers, she's already thinking, if they won't make products for us, I'll make them myself. She started carrying a whole chemistry set in her bag. Foundation bases, pigments, mixing tools. Other models would show up with their portfolio. Iman showed up with a mobile cosmetics lab. Makeup artists would watch in fascination as she created colors they'd never seen in their professional kits. "What's that shade called?" they'd ask. "Human," she'd reply. It would take almost 2 decades for that plan to fully form, but the seed was planted right there, in front of a mirror, looking at her gray face and deciding that no options just meant create your own. This is what I love about Iman. She never just fixed problems. She turned them into empires. By the late 70s and early 80s, Iman wasn't the only black model making waves. Bethan Hardison was out there being fierce. A young Naomi Campbell was starting to turn heads, and the fashion industry had figured out their favorite game, musical chairs. Here's how it worked. 1 spot per show for a black model, maybe 2 if they were feeling generous. Let the black girls fight over it. May the best walk win. It was like f***ing Hunger Games, but with higher heels. The really sick part? It was working. Agencies would literally pit black models against each other. "Oh, we're considering you or Bethan for the Versace show. It's between you and Naomi for the Vogue cover." They'd sit back and watch these women compete, knowing that as long as they were fighting each other, they wouldn't fight the system. But Iman saw right through it. And this is where she did something that still gives me chills. She called Bethan. She called Naomi. She said, essentially, "They're playing us. What if we refuse to play?" In 1988, they formed their first advocacy group. No competing for crumbs, no undermining each other for the single diversity spot. Instead, they'd demand real inclusion, multiple black models per show, equal pay across the board, representation that actually represented the world. The fashion industry didn't know what hit them. They were so used to marginalized people being grateful for whatever they got. They never expected them to unionize. But my favorite part? When they'd go to meetings with designers and casting directors, Iman would let them talk first. She'd sit there in her perfect outfit with her perfect posture, letting them explain why they could only book 1 black model, why the clients wouldn't understand, why the market wasn't ready. And then she'd smile that smile that could melt steel and say something like, "Interesting. Now let me explain why you're wrong." She'd pull out statistics. Consumer spending by black women on beauty and fashion, the global market beyond Europe and America, the fact that limiting their customer vision was literally leaving money on the table. She turned diversity from a moral argument into a business case, and suddenly CEOs were listening. She turned solidarity into a weapon. And suddenly, musical chairs didn't seem like such a fun game anymore. 1994. Iman's been out of full-time modeling for 5 years. She'd done her dramatic farewell shoot with Helmut Newton in 1989. all diamonds and attitude, and everyone assumed that was that. Another pretty face aged out of an industry that worships youth. They thought wrong. See, while everyone was watching her marry David Bowie in 1992, and yes, we'll get to that love story, Iman was quietly building something revolutionary. All those years of mixing her own foundation backstage, all that data she'd been collecting, all those times she'd watched Black women leave Sephora empty-handed because nothing matched their skin, she was done watching. It was time to build. Iman Cosmetics launched with a simple premise that was somehow radical. Black women deserve makeup that actually matches their skin, not 3 shades of brown and call it diversity. We're talking dozens of shades for every undertone from the deepest ebony to the lightest cafe au lait. The beauty industry laughed. They actually laughed. Major cosmetics executives told her it was a niche market, that Black women didn't spend money on makeup, that she should start small, maybe do a lipstick line, see how it goes. Within a year, Iman Cosmetics was in major department stores. By 2010, they were doing $25 million annually. But here's what those executives missed. Iman wasn't just selling makeup, she was selling dignity. Every woman who finally found her perfect shade, who didn't have to mix 3 foundations to look human, who could walk into a store and find products actually made for her, that woman became a customer for life. The best part? Iman would show up at department store launches herself. The supermodel who'd graced every major magazine would stand behind counters, teaching regular women how to apply foundation. She'd share her backstage secrets. She'd tell them they were beautiful. One woman who met her at a counter once said Iman spent 30 minutes with her, finding her perfect shade, and at the end said, "You don't need makeup to be beautiful, but if you're going to wear it, it should make you feel like the queen you already are." She also did something the beauty industry had never seen. She hired from her community, Black chemists, Black marketers, Black executives. Not tokens, but leaders. She created an entire ecosystem that proved Black businesses could compete at the highest levels when given the chance. That's not CEO talk, that's revolutionary talk, and it sold millions. 2013, Fashion Week. The industry is congratulating itself on how far it's come. They've got Naomi, they've got Tyra, they've got… well, that's kind of it for the A-list shows. But hey, progress, right? Wrong. Iman, now in her 50s and established as fashion royalty, decides she's done being polite about it. She doesn't whisper at cocktail parties or leak anonymous quotes. She goes full scorched earth. She names names. Phoebe Philo at Celine, Marc Jacobs, Victoria Beckham, designer after designer who season after season sent all-white lineups down their runways. She doesn't call them racist, that would be too easy to dismiss. Instead, she asks one simple question. If you can't find one Black girl beautiful enough for your show, what does that say about your vision? The fashion press goes insane. How dare she call out these untouchable designers? Doesn't she know how things work? You don't bite the hand that dresses you. But see, that's the beauty of building your own empire. Iman didn't need their approval anymore. She had her cosmetics company. She had her legacy. She had her you money, and she was going to use all of it to say what models still trying to book jobs couldn't. The response was immediate and predictable. Some designers made excuses about their aesthetic. Others promised to do better next season. A few actually changed, but the real impact wasn't in the immediate response. It was in the conversation she forced. Suddenly, fashion journalists were counting models of color on runways. Diversity became a metric. What had been invisible became undeniable. She also took it beyond fashion. When she signed on as CARE International's global advocate in 2019, she made it clear, this wasn't celebrity charity tourism. This was a refugee using her platform to help other refugees. This was a woman who'd built an empire returning to pull others up. And Iman? She kept naming names, season after season, like a fashion watchdog in couture clothing. When asked why she was being so aggressive about it, she said something that still rings in my ears. I've been in this business for 40 years. I'm too old to pretend it's getting better on its own. In 2016, David Bowie died. Iman posted a simple tribute. The struggle is real, but so is God. And in those 8 words, you can see everything she is, a woman who knows pain intimately, but refuses to let it win. Today, when young Black models walk runways in their correct foundation shade, when they demand equal pay, when they refuse to compete for the single diversity spot, they're walking a path Iman paved with her perfectly manicured hands. She didn't just change fashion. She changed how power works in fashion. She proved that sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is say no. That building your own table beats begging for a seat. That a refugee's daughter with 2 childhood photos could build an empire worth millions. But maybe the most radical thing about Iman is this: she never forgot where she came from. The girl who fled Somalia with nothing became a woman who could buy anything, and she used that position to make sure other girls wouldn't have to fight so hard for so little. She's still out there, by the way, still calling out all-white runways, still running her beauty empire, still proving that true beauty isn't about perfection, it's about refusing to accept anything less than what you deserve. And honestly, we could all use a little more Iman energy in our lives, because if a teenage refugee can transform an entire industry by simply saying, "No, that's not good enough," imagine what the rest of us could do if we stopped accepting the unacceptable. The struggle is real, but so is the power to change it.